Welcome back, everyone. It's been a while since I've made a video. Life's thrown some big things my way lately. I'll probably talk more about all that's happening personally next time, but for now, that can wait. Because I've been busy, I'm skipping the three big things format for now, and will instead go deep in on one issue. And honestly, this might be the most important video I've ever done so far and will ever make, so let's get into it. If you've been in right-wing circles online these past few days, you've probably seen clips of Ben Shapiro's interview with Megyn Kelly going around. If you haven't, I want to show you the part that I really want to focus in on.
The real question is, for me, I got into this business because I care about the ideas and I care about the ideals. And so when you're determining what is conservatism, what should the future of America look like, and where do you draw the lines, those are the questions that I need to answer in my job.
So he's talking about wanting to conserve conservative principles, and I personally think that he's done a great job at that, but this obviously is in discussion about Tucker Carlson's interview with Nick Fuentes. And look, if you've watched me before, then you know that I haven't been a huge Tucker Carlson fan lately, but I have been somewhat of a fan in the past. I thought that he was unfairly let go from Fox, and I became a paying member of the Tucker Carlson network before it ever even launched. So I have been a supporter of both Ben and Tucker in the past, and I think that both have been unfairly maligned at some points recently. But this talk of what it means to be a conservative reminded me of something that I saw from Jordan Peterson recently, who is, quite frankly, another man who I think gets unfairly maligned. But the following is a clip from a speech he gave on his We Who Wrestle with God tour, and he talks about what it means to be a classical liberal.
The liberal philosophy is essentially the presumption that the cardinal level of identity in a political system should be the individual. When does that work? And the classic liberals, they kind of knew this. They knew that the presumption that the individual was sovereign could be treated as sovereign and could be treated as the cardinal unit of analysis and could be treated as the locale, let's say, of divine right, natural rights. That was only sustainable in a culture that was intrinsically moral, right? So let's say, that's why, for example, your nation is established as one nation under God.
Now, we hear this all the time, this talk of being a classical liberal. Jordan says that he identifies as one, and unlike anybody else, he actually tells us what that means. To him, a classical liberal is someone who believes that the individual is the primary unit in society. But Peterson says the individual as the primary unit only works when we live in a moral society. Now, it's important to understand what he means by classical liberalism. He's not talking about the Bill Clinton 90s style Democrat. Instead, he's talking about the John Locke, Adam Smith tradition that shaped America itself. What he's saying is that both Democrats and Republicans historically believed that the individual is the primary unit in politics. And that worked because we all shared a higher moral purpose. The difference in party was where the emphasis got placed. Republicans expressed this higher purpose mostly through social policy, but leaned individualist and libertarian on economics. Democrats favored the higher purpose through economic policy, believing that government could solve poverty and hunger through redistribution. But they were more individualist, even libertarian, on social issues. So for essentially all of America's existence, both sides saw the individual as the foundation, united by a shared moral vision. We just applied that moral vision differently. But that started to change for the Democrats back in 2012, where they went from being focused on the individual to being focused on the group. Their social policy stopped being about letting you do what you want, but rather it was about divvying up people by their racial or sexual identity and then making policy decisions based on what each group wanted. In essence, they ushered in the era of identity politics. And along with that came a loss of a shared moral purpose, a guiding principle that we all share in common. And I guess you could argue which came first, the identity politics or the loss of the moral purpose. I don't know, and that would require more research and knowledge than I have. But either way, the Democrats lost their sense of a moral purpose around that same time, which, quite frankly, is expected when they place the individual above the higher standard when it comes to social issues. Eventually that will give way to what we see now. The drag queen story hour and things like that will eventually come to the surface. But now you might say, but isn't them wanting to help more people with government proof that they're still guided by a higher power, at least economically? And the answer to that is no, of course not. And how do I know that? Because of their rhetoric. They no longer talk about individual duty. It's about what people are owed. It used to be that social programs were seen as something to help someone get back on their feet until they can support themselves. To Democrats now, social programs are essentially just a way of life. You see, if you don't want to work, the government should help you. One theme in pretty much any faith is the duty that you owe to yourself, to your family, and to society in general to be the best that you can be. But now the left is all about what you are owed by society. And now the right is following in that same path. And just like with the left, I can't tell if the right lost its moral compass first or its sense of individuality. Because right now, members of the right are divvying themselves up by group, talking only of what they, as a group, are owed by others. The right is falling into their own version of identity politics. And look, I get why some on the right fell into this. The left had spent years grouping people by identity, and white Christian males ended up as a universal scapegoat. The only group deemed unworthy of protection, actively worked against. Just look back at Black Lives Matter. When the left started pushing BLM so hard, they said it was because the system, the all-powerful system, was built to put black people down. They specifically said that the system was built by straight white Christian men, and that straight white Christian men need to take a back seat. The same thing with feminism. Straight white Christian men needed to take a back seat, and that a woman be a boss babe. More recently, we saw DEI take over the left and eventually get defeated. But the point there was that there were too many straight white males in colleges, in executive positions, at companies, too many white males flying planes. We needed less white men in those positions. So I can't blame the young white Christian men for falling into this trap. This trap of seeing everything through the lens of this group that the left invented to be a scapegoat for all the world's problems. These young white Christian men of the same age and belief system as myself, grew resentful toward the people looking to blame everything on them. And in response, they want the same benefits being granted to other groups granted to them. But some bad-acting political influencers noticed this building resentment and decided to capitalize on it. They weaponize identity politics, using group identity as the lens through which their audiences see the world. Some of them, like Nick Fuentes, are formerly openly white supremacists who reframed their arguments through faith, because the white nationalism wasn't quite working out for them. Others, like Tucker Carlson, blend racial and faith-based grievances depending on what resonates at the time. And others, like Candace Owens, focus entirely on faith-based victimhood. But the mechanism is identical. Find a grievance, amplify it, make people see themselves as part of a victimized group. And they're all utilizing faith as the identity marker. And here's the thing. The problem isn't that they are loudly proclaiming their faith. I'm a Catholic. I openly tell people I'm Catholic. I proudly profess my faith. But I don't twist my faith into a wedge to argue for group advantage. I don't flout my Catholicism as a political brand, using it as a signal that I'm in the right group, using my Catholicism to justify drawing borders about who I like and who I don't, who is in the in-group and who deserves hatred. Fuentes and his followers pretend that religion is their shield, but in reality they use it just as a sword against anyone who is not a white Christian male. His Catholicism is not about his faith, it's about creating enemies. And his enemies are anyone who is not a white Christian male. And now when you turn on Tucker Carlson, it's increasingly the same thing. Except, he'll bring out a random Muslim with barely more followers than I have to stoke this narrative about Christians being under attack, specifically by the Jews. Now, to him, the facts don't matter. It doesn't matter that Israel is the only country in the Middle East where Christians have been welcomed and accepted since its inception. It doesn't matter that Israel is the only country in the Middle East whose Christian population has actually grown since 1949. It doesn't matter that Israel actively protects Christian holy sites through the Protection of Holy Places law. No, to him, all that matters is that he can present a story where white Christians are being harmed, being persecuted, that we, as a group, are being attacked by the people we have always thought of as our allies. It's everyone against us, and we must rise up. He fuels that lie, and why does he do it? Well, anger is profitable. Victimhood is engagement. The more people feel harmed, the more they will tune in. People have this desire to be a victim, and he is preying on that oft unrecognized desire. And quite honestly, just strictly politically speaking, one of the worst things about this is that it gives fodder to those on the left who have been calling Republicans Nazis for years. And I'm not exaggerating here. Fuentes and Tucker are actively giving credence to those claims. Tucker had on a man who, in Tucker's own words, is the only honest historian, who claims that Churchill was the bad guy in World War II. They honestly believe that Hitler wasn't that bad. Now, according to them, the Germans didn't actually mean to kill Jews. No, instead they just didn't plan their labor camps well enough, and they had no choice but to kill everyone once the camps got overcrowded. Some will even openly say that they love Hitler. It's insane. These views used to get you laughed at. Back when this sort of talk just came from the openly white supremacists, the marketplace of free ideas would push them out. But by reframing everything through a religious lens, these viewpoints have now been mainstreamed. They found their way onto respectable platforms, and it's becoming increasingly clear they're using religion as a front for white nationalism. Now, is Tucker a white nationalist? No, I don't think he actually believes that. Fuentes does, but not Tucker. Tucker just says what gets him views. He always has. That's why I initially started watching other people. Back when he was on Fox, I felt that Tucker always just said what his audience would want to hear, or at least frame his views in a way that his audience wouldn't get mad at him. It felt dishonest to me, and everything he has done since going independent has felt dishonest. And now that his audience is the chronically online, he's fully embracing this identity politics game. Now, back to my point about loss of moral virtue. I said that it's clear that the left has abandoned morality because they no longer care about personal virtue. It's all about what each group deserves. And this wing of the right is going down that same path. None of these people talk about personal responsibility, no honest discussion of duty to yourself, to God, to your neighbor. Gone is the old JFK. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Now it's, I'm a victim, give me what I want, give me the power to do what I want. And for those of you who have fallen into this trap, let me say this directly to you. These people you are listening to only want money and power. You will not have a better life if these people get what they want. They may get in power, but you will still be who you are. It is only through your personal responsibility will you become who you want to be. Your own drive, your own will to be somebody. Giving someone like Nick Fuentes power will not make your life better. It'll just make it harder for anyone who isn't in his in-crowd to live a good life. But the entire time he will tell you it's better because the white Christian is in charge. But you will not feel a damn thing different. When group identity reigns, resentment naturally follows. That much is clear. It doesn't matter what someone believes or how they personally act. What matters is that they are a wicked Jew. What matters is that J.D. Vance is a race traitor, as Nick Fuentes called him. It's not about political belief, it's a purity cult. Anyone on the outside of the cult is evil. Anyone not squarely towing the line is the target. That's not what conservatism is about, and it sure as hell isn't Christianity. And look, I mentioned Candace Owens earlier. She's clearly not white and clearly not a male. So how does she fit into this discussion? Because she adopts the exact same group identity first mentality that we've been talking about. She leans hard into the idea of Christian persecution, telling her followers that everyone is out to get them, making them believe that their Christian identity is the primary lens through which to view the world. Now, do some people hate Christians? Do some countries actively persecute Christians? Yes, absolutely. But here's the thing, and this is important. The American government does not systematically victimize Christians. Israel doesn't systematically victimize Christians. Christians are allowed to worship freely in both places. But if Candace can find one individual story, one person mistreating a Christian, one policy that affects one Christian negatively, then she can extrapolate that into a grand narrative that they all hate us. She takes the exception and makes it the rule. And in doing so, she's playing the same game as everyone else in this space. She's replacing individual judgment with group loyalty. Individual facts don't matter. What matters is whether the story serves the group narrative. So here's where it gets interesting. Although Candace openly despises Nick Fuentes and positions herself as his ideological opponent, she's really just operating in the same political space as him. Why? Because both of them are pushing identity-first politics. He does it through race and faith. She does it through faith alone. The mechanism is identical. Find a grievance, amplify it, tell people they belong to a victimized group, and suddenly you've got an audience that sees the world divided into us and them. The label changes. His is white nationalism dressed as faith. Hers is dishonest, faith-based activism. But the underlying logic is the same. And because the faith-based framing is broader, it creates overlap in audiences. Fuentes attracts those drawn to explicit racial and Christian identity politics. Candace attracts Christians who want to see themselves as victims. And a portion of her audience also listens to Fuentes. Those who either aren't bothered by his white nationalism or don't take it seriously. But both are pulling from overlapping audiences, feeding the same appetite for grievance narratives, just with different entry points and different levels of racial explicitness. She's obviously not a white nationalist, but she is running parallel to them, pulling from the same pool of grievance-hungry viewers. And frankly, she's doing it because it works. It gets her clicks. It gets her attention. It builds her platform. Whether she believes what she's saying is or not is almost beside the point. The damage is the same. And what is this damage? Just look at the Democrats to figure it out. The damage is the damage that identity politics always brings. Endless cycles of grievance and division. When you tell people that they are owed something just for being a part of a group, you will always get more resentment directed at those supposedly keeping something from them. You saw it with the left. To every group, the white Christian male was the enemy. This sort of identity politics is what led to people like Candace becoming a conservative in the first place. But these people are now using that exact same tactic in their favor, framing their own identity, either faith or race, as the victimized group. It will only lead to more hatred and less virtue. There is no room for grace, for shared duty, or for shared moral purpose. There's no room for personal responsibility, duty to yourself, your family, to God. In other words, there is no room for conservative principles. If both the left and the right embrace the view that your value lies in your group identity, we will quickly become a country devoid of any common good. And that's exactly what these influencers want, a fractured, resentful audience that they can monetize forever. It's time to stop falling for it. The answer is not more identity politics, more tribal loyalty, or seeing every problem as proof that your group is always the victim. The answer is to recover what's been lost, a sense of personal duty, higher moral purpose, a belief that you are responsible for your own good. In other words, the answer is to conserve conservative principles. Thanks for sticking around and watching. If you want more honest discussion about politics, culture, faith, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Drop a comment, tell me what you think. I'm doing my best to try to get a consistent schedule going. Support from you generally helps make that possible. Thank you.